A man drifted in the sea for 3 days and 3 nights after an air crash. Just when he was on the verge of despair, he finally saw land. He quickly brought his kayak to the beach. Then he walked barefoot and cautiously into the woods to see if there were any signs of human beings. But after shouting for a long time, no one responded. The only thing that answered him was the merciless sound of the waves. So the man scraped out a distress signal on the beach with his feet, hoping that the passing flights in the sky could see it. Then, the man made a simple shelter on the beach with his kayak. Exhausted, he planned to make other plans the next day. Unexpectedly at night, just as Tom lay down to sleep, suddenly there was an extremely strange sound in the woods. Facing the unknown danger, he immediately became alert and stayed awake all night, holding a paddle in fear. Early the next morning, Tom saw that most of the distress signal he wrote the day before had been washed away by the waves. In order to survive, he quickly found some deadwood. He specifically chose a wider place where the waves couldn't reach and remade a larger distress signal. Fortunately, several express packages were washed onto the beach at this time. Tom picked up all these packages. Maybe they would be useful in critical moments. But just then, the strange sound came from the woods again. He became vigilant again and shouted loudly. After waiting for a long time, there was still no response. This time he simply gathered his courage to see what on earth was making the noise. Unexpectedly, just as he walked over, a ripe coconut fell from the sky. "Come down here." It turned out that the strange noise was the sound of the coconut falling. Tom finally felt relieved. In this way he collected more coconuts. It happened that he hadn't drunk water for a day. He picked up a coconut and smashed it hard against the rock. Unexpectedly, such a small thing stopped this big man. Then he smashed it hard on the shoulder of the rock, but obviously it was useless. Then he smashed the coconut with the stone beside him. In an instant, the stone broke into pieces. Looking at the only sharp stone left in his hand, Tom was confident this time. He used this stone knife to continuously cut the coconut. Finally, with his efforts, he managed to open the coconut, but the little bit of water in it was obviously not enough to moisten his throat. Failure is the mother of success. Tom learned from his mistakes and skillfully used the sharp stone to drill a small hole in the coconut. He couldn't wait to put the coconut to his mouth and greedily enjoyed the sweetness. After drinking enough water, Tom simply packed up his things and leaned on a stick, ready to check if there were any other opportunities for rescue nearby. He searched all the way around the rocky cliffs. However, from morning to afternoon, apart from finding another express package, he found nothing. Moreover, he found that he had returned to the original place. Tom was a little desperate. In order to further verify his conjecture, he decided to climb to the top of the cliff to see if this was really an uninhabited island. Unfortunately, at this time his foot was scratched by the coral, and a lot of blood flowed out. Tom took off his pants and cut the fabric with a stone knife, then tied it to his foot to make a simple shoe that could be used. Then he found some herbs and stuffed them into his woolen socks. It could not only stop the bleeding but also be used as shoes. In this way, Tom walked towards the top of the mountain. An hour later, he finally climbed to the highest point. He looked down at the place where he was. It was surrounded by the sea on all sides. What's worse, there was no other land in sight. Trapped on this uninhabited island, Tom was completely desperate. However, before he could be sad, he suddenly saw a person floating not far away on the sea. Seeing hope, Tom ran down the mountain at full speed and swam towards that person at a sprint speed. It turned out to be the captain of the crashed plane. However, the captain had already lost his life. Then he dragged the captain onto the beach. At present, Tom could only try his best to collect useful supplies. He found a flashlight, and fortunately it still worked. Then he took off the captain's sports shoes and compared them with his own feet. Although the size didn't fit well, there must be a way. Then he found a wallet in the captain's pants. There was a family photo of the captain in it. Looking at this photo, he suddenly felt heavy. A complete and happy family was gone. Maybe the families of the victims were extremely sad. Tom pulled himself together and prepared to bury the victim here. He also left the family photo beside the captain, and then wrote the victim's name and age on the reef with a stone. After finishing these things, it was already sunset. At night, Tom lay in the shelter, feeling extremely lonely and helpless. Fortunately, the photo of his beautiful fiancée always comforted him. But as days passed, he still didn't wait for any rescue. However, Tom seemed to gradually get used to the environment here. The dew on the leaves every morning was his source of life. After drinking enough water, Tom simply packed up his things and leaned on a stick, ready to check if there were any other opportunities for rescue nearby. He didn't dare to delay and paddled with all his might. However, he underestimated the power of nature. The waves after waves made it impossible for him to move forward. He paddled from morning to noon, and found that he had only moved less than 100 meters. Even so, he still didn't give up and paddled desperately. Finally, he was overturned by a huge wave. Unfortunately, Tom's thigh hit the coral reef and was bleeding continuously. He cried out in pain. Desperate Tom could only drag his injured leg and the deflated kayak and limp back to the island. Just then, to make matters worse, it started to pour down in a blink of an eye. Tom quickly used the kayak to cover the express packages. Without a shelter, and with an injured leg, he had no choice but to go to the only cave on the island, and use the flashlight to check the situation around. After confirming that it was safe, he then climbed into the cave with difficulty. Fortunately, there was a mountain spring here. Thirsty, he stretched his head over. He was glad to drink the clean water. but as he was drinking, he fell asleep directly, and even forgot to turn off the flashlight. The next day when Tom woke up, obviously the flashlight was out of power. Moreover, his wound was seriously infected. If it wasn't treated in time, he might not live for a few days. Out of the instinct of survival, he prepared to open the picked up packages to see if he could find any useful supplies. The first package contained a pair of ice skates. The blades on the soles seemed to come in handy. The second package was a volleyball. The third was an evening dress. He sneered when he found he couldn't fit into it, but the black toll on the skirt seemed useful. The subsequent packages contained tapes and a useless paper contract. However, he hesitated when he came to the last package because it had a pattern of angel wings on it. Maybe this was the last hope he clung to. After all, one needs hope to have the motivation to live on. Tom made the most of everything. He spread out the delivery cartons to use as a bed. Then he used the ice skates to cut strips of cloth and used the shoelaces to make a simple bandage for his wound. With these ice skates it was easier to cut coconuts, and he could also use them to whittle a fish spear. Soon he speared a big crab. Tom, who hadn't had any protein for days, was overjoyed. He couldn't wait to take it off and say thanks. Little did he know that the meat of this kind of crab was just a pile of mushy raw stuff. Eating it would probably lead to death from various bacterial infections. So he made a fishing net with the tulle skirt, and easily caught a small fish weighing less than 10 catties. He quickly put it in his mouth and chewed carefully. As he chewed, he felt something was missing. Tom then realized that he needed fire. So he imitated primitive people and started making fire by rubbing sticks. He put the torn paper under the wood and started rubbing continuously. But he never expected that after rubbing from below, he didn't even see a single spark. Even so, Tom didn't give up. He decided to take a break, eat some coconut meat to maintain his physical functions, and then continue. Looking at the coconut shell in his hand, he suddenly had an idea. Maybe rubbing the wood back and forth in this way could make fire. He got right to it with full confidence. As it turned out, this method was indeed more labor-saving and could speed up the friction. But he wasn't careful, and his palm was scratched by the wood. Before his old wound healed, a new one came. This time his willpower was completely shattered. During these days stranded on the deserted island, the loneliness had been bone deep. He vented his despair in great anger. After releasing his emotions, he calmed down and had to face the reality. He simply bandaged his hand and planned to rethink how to make fire. Looking at the volleyball on the ground, the bloodstain in the shape of a palm print was like a human figure. Then Tom gathered some sweat on his forehead and wiped the volleyball to create facial features for it, and named it Wilson. Lonely Tom was no longer alone. He put Wilson beside him and constantly encouraged himself. With the company, he was full of strength. He kept rubbing the wood, and finally some sparks appeared on the wood, but the next second, the sparks were gone. Looking at the split wood, he made a new discovery. It was because there was too little air that the sparks went out. Then he dug a pit and put the wood on it. With more air coming in, the wood soon caught fire. This achievement, through his own continuous efforts, made him extremely excited. At night, he piled up a big bonfire on the beach as a distress signal. This was the first time Tom felt the hope of living since he was stranded on the deserted island. Then he feasted on the seafood. He picked up a piece of crab claw meat with his fingers. It was really delicious. After solving the food problem, Tom began to analyze his geographical location. Based on the time and speed, he roughly calculated that the search area of the rescue team was as large as 500,000 square miles, and the island was not near the main shipping route of cargo ships. The chance of being found by the rescue team was almost zero. There was nothing he could do. As long as he was alive, there was hope. Due to the long-term lack of vitamins, Tom's teeth became severely inflamed. He was tortured by the toothache every day. It was better to get it over with. He summoned up the courage to put the ice skates on the inflamed tooth, and then picked up a stone and smashed it hard. The bad tooth was finally pulled out, but the sudden pain made Tom faint immediately. In the following days, he would talk to Wilson about his feelings every day, and draw a sketch of his fiancée on the rock to encourage himself to keep going. Time flies like an arrow. 4 years passed in a blink of an eye. Tom, who was originally fat and bloated, had become extremely thin and frail, as if a gust of wind could blow him down. No one knew how he had endured these 4 years. Living alone had eroded the hope in his eyes. Tom was living like a walking corpse. Fortunately, his fishing skills had also improved a lot. He had once thought about escaping from the deserted island, but the merciless waves made him give up this idea. Whenever he felt so lonely that he couldn't go on living, he would go to the cliff and prepare to hang himself. But he didn't have the courage to end his life because he had promised his fiancée to marry her. Until one day, when he was fishing in the sea, he suddenly found a green iron plate. Facing this new thing, Tom was very happy. He put the iron sheet on the beach, stood it up and sat with Wilson to admire it. Unexpectedly, as he looked at it, he had a different idea. The material was light, and wouldn't be damaged even if it was bent. It was the perfect material for a sail. There was hope for him to leave the deserted island. He got right to work, to leave as soon as possible. Tom tied the ice skates to the wood to make, and he lit a fire under the big tree. This could not only speed up the felling process, but also quickly dry the moisture in the wood. He prepared the materials for making the raft. Next he needed to make ropes. He cut down small trees and peeled off the bark. He worked day and night without eating or drinking to make ropes. Tom knew that the time, place and people were all right. This was the perfect time to leave. If he missed it, he would have to wait until next year. He cut down all the small trees on the island, and even used the videotapes, but the ropes for making the raft were still far from enough. Suddenly he remembered that there was a rope on the cliff when he tried to commit suicide. These ropes were just enough to make the raft. Back in the cave, Tom was extremely conflicted. He knew that the sea was very dangerous, and his fate was uncertain if he set off. But he couldn't spend his whole life on the deserted island with a volleyball. At this time he felt that Wilson was mocking his former timidity, so he angrily threw Wilson out of the cave. But the next second he ran out to look for Wilson. In these 4 years, Wilson had become his friend. To make up for his mistake, he repaired Wilson's facial features again. Before long, Tom successfully made the raft. He took the wings, photos of his fiancée, and Wilson. He chose a windy day and used the method of sliding horizontally to tilt the boat into the sea, and started his adventure. He rode the raft through the waves with difficulty. Whenever he encountered a wave he couldn't cross, he quickly pulled up the sail made of the iron sheet. The wings of hope were particularly eye-catching. As it turned out, the raft Tom made was strong enough. With the help of the sea breeze, they successfully crossed the big waves, and reached a relatively calm sea. Gradually Tom walked farther and farther away, looking at the place where he had lived. His eyes were filled with tears as he recalled everything that had happened on the island. At this moment he actually felt a bit nostalgic for this place, but he didn't stop rowing the oars. Under the setting sun he and Wilson had rekindled hope. In the following days, when Tom was hungry, he just speared fish in the sea. When he was thirsty he caught natural rainwater, or drank the available water. Even at night, killer whales escorted him. However, the good times didn't last long. One night, a sudden storm hit. The sail was blown away in an instant, and he could only hold on to the raft tightly to avoid being blown away himself. The next day, Gujing used alcohol to wake up the unconscious Tom. However, when Tom woke up, he found that Wilson was gone. He shouted for Wilson anxiously. Fortunately, Wilson was not far away. Tom quickly jumped into the water, tied the raft to his body, and swam towards Wilson. But the rope was too short, and with his limited physical strength, he could only watch Wilson drift away helplessly. In just an instant, Tom felt like he had lost everything, and the last line of defense in his heart completely collapsed. No matter how hard he fought against nature, all his struggles were ultimately in vain. Without the sail, and without the company of his friend, he gave up struggling, and just lay on the raft, drifting. He didn't know how much time had passed. He looked haggard. But just then, Tom suddenly heard the sound of a ship's engine. He quickly waved his hand for help, and the crew on the cargo ship happened to see Tom. After 1,500 days, he was finally rescued. But when Tom returned to the modern city, he found that his fiancée had already gotten married, and had a child. The fact proved that 1,500 days were enough to change a lot of things.